Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Books and Beer, extra time, extra helpings of books and beer. With me, I'm Luke Richardson, and this, sitting to the left or to the right of me, is Terry Marchion. How are you doing? Marchion.
I'm good.
Marchion. You did say that before a couple of minutes ago.
That's all right.
Marchion. I'm going to write it down again. Marchion. How are you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah.
I'd say good morning, but here's my coffee.
Yes, you are early doors, and it looks quite dark where you are. If people looked at us on the screen, they think I was somewhere really bright.
Yeah.
And you were in gloomy old Blighty.
Exactly.
The dark.
It just you need to get a brighter desk lamp. That's all.
Yeah. That's it. And I'm pleased that you're here finally. I know I've wanted to get you on one of these calls for a while, and when you suggested just do it at another time, I was like, oh, that's an idea. You know, it was like the door in the back of the wardrobe, a new paradigm had been discovered.
There you go. Yeah. Well, it's with our 8-hour difference, this is the only time I could even join up. So.
Yeah, that's it.
But here we are.
Here we are. We've made it, and that's fantastic. I'm excited to show you the biggest beer. You've seen this already, Terry, but
yes.
To show you guys at home the biggest beer that I think I've ever seen in a can. And my friend gave me this, and I'm going to drink it in honor of you, Terry, because you're not having one.
There you go.
On the call this
there
evening.
You go. I think Steve Moore is drooling right now.
I know. Steve had two of them, but anyway, I'm just going to have the one. It's a litre. And you and I, well, I'll fess up. You and I couldn't work out what that is in terms of pints. So if you're
about 2 pints. I think it's 2 pints.
I think it was about 2 pints, which made me more confident. And when your first reaction was like, "You're gonna drink all of that," you know? I was a bit like, "Should I be?"
Well, now I got to go find a liter of beer for myself now.
I know. Well, you brew it, don't you? You're a brewer.
I am.
Yeah. How long is? I mean, you like this is probably a trait in your personality, perhaps, mate. You like things that take ages and are very difficult.
Well, beer doesn't take that long, as long as you might think.
Oh, really?
No, it's about 4 weeks before it's drinkable.
That's not long at all, is it?
No, not at all.
Wow. But you need to know what to do, I suppose. You can't just wang stuff in a demijohn and put it under the bed, can you? You need
No, not quite. No, not quite like that. No. It takes about you gotta brew it. That whole process takes about 3 hours maybe. And then you have to let it rest and ferment. So that's about a 2-week process. And then if you're gonna bottle it, then that's another week to 2 weeks, and then drink it.
Then that's 5 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, mate. What sort of beers do you make when you have brewed them in the past?
I stick to ales because they're the easiest.
So they're not carbonated.
They are.
Oh.
They're natural carbonated. So I don't keg it and pump carbon dioxide in there. I naturally carbonate it in the bottle. So it's that's what takes the 2 weeks. So you got to give it 2 weeks just to get the bottle conditioning going and get the carbonation.
Brilliant.
But it's usually good. Steve can attest to how good it is.
Yeah, I bet Steve's in the comments right now shouting.
Yeah, exactly.
He is. He was first commenter. Here he is. Thanks for joining us, Steve. Alison's in here as well, which is great to see you. Hi, Luke and Terry. Steve Taylor is in as well. And yes, he's already talking about your beer making skills. So I look forward, Terry, to making it over to your part of the world and trying one of these in person.
Of course. Anytime, my friend.
I know it will happen. Oh, and John says he's got the answers. I thought it was about 600, but it's nearly 2 pints. I mean, that's okay. I mean, maybe I won't drink it all, but we'll see how we get on.
Give it the old college try, though.
Yeah. That's it. And Steve says, your live videos are my excuse to procrastinate.
There you go.
I feel that's it. We're not just here to talk about beer, though, as much as we are. I purposefully, when I named this, put books in front of beer, so as to, make us think that the books were slightly more important. Although, based on this conversation so far,
it's equal.
Yeah. So, when did you start writing? Then, when was your?
I got serious. I got really serious about it in 2016. So it's only been about 6 years, almost 6 years, that I've been really serious about it. And the funny thing is I started. There was this Twitter pitch thing that was going on that I had. The story that I was working on had been working on since I was, a wee lad. And I thought, oh, what the heck? Let's see if anybody would be interested. And I got some interest. Nice. And I got someone who wanted to see the first 3 chapters. And I'm like, oh, holy cow. This could actually happen. So that's when I got serious about it. And once I realized, it's funny, once I realized that someone would want to read what I write, it's like a switch got flipped, and I looked at it with a different set of eyes. And I won't say the writing got better, but it made it. How to say it? But it just kind of made it more real, I guess. So I was able to push through and finish things and make it sound intelligent-ish, And that went over 3 or 4 different drafts before I finally got it to a point where I felt it could be published. And now I look back and I'm like, God, what the hell was I writing?
But that is a turning point, isn't it? When someone takes an interest in it, and it could be anyone. It could be a partner or a friend or a publisher or whoever an agent, whoever is involved in the process. Someone goes, that's got a future, or that's got a sort of, there's something in there,
exactly.
That's great.
And that book, that was my first book, and it's gotten some really great reviews. And so, Reader's Favorite gave it a 5-star review, and I'm just like, wow, nice. It's so cool. So, obviously I did something right.
And is this The Missing Yesterdays?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. I have to confess I've not read it. So I won't claim I have.
That's okay. A lot of people have not.
No, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Where would you place it in a genre sense then?
It's definitely science fiction, adventure, but it's set for a younger audience. So it's like, middle grade, young adult, somewhere in there. I would say middle grade, upper middle grade.
Is that because of the age of the characters?
Yes.
In it? Is that what?
Yeah.
And I
try to write it with a little bit of it's definitely not violent in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. And I keep the language reasonable, but I try to write, like I was telling somebody else, I try to write my books with hope. And there's always a good ending at the end. There's never anything really horrible that happens except to the bad guys. But because that's what I liked to read when I was a kid. Yeah. So, I write what I wanted to read.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, isn't it? So when you sat down to write in 2016, you intended, you sort of had that vision in some way. You were like, it's going to be the sort of book I would have wanted when I was 14, 15, 16. That was
honestly, I just wanted to finish the damn story. I had no preconceptions because I knew nothing about the industry. So I pushed publish on that first book thinking, publish it, they will come, sort of thing. Yes. And of course that didn't happen. And then I discovered Mark Dawson and Joanna Penn and started doing the research and realized how much I didn't know what I was doing. I can't say I'm any better at knowledge now, but I know a little bit more now,
I think in a way that's a saving grace though, isn't it? Because if you knew how high the mountain was whilst you were at base camp, you'd have just thought, nah.
Yeah, no. Give it up right there.
It's too high.
We're down the pencil, screw it, this ain't happening.
Yeah. I think that frequently and think actually, not that that's a regret at all, but you learn things as you need to,
Exactly. And I've met such amazing people, yourself included, that it's just it's a lot of it's been a lot of fun.
And so you've written books sort of in a serial form after that, or have you spread yourself around in other things as well?
Not yet. In fact, I just published the 6th.
Wow, that's great. So one a year average. Wow.
Yeah, well,
it's less than.
About less than that. I don't write every day. and I'm not consistent about when I do sit down and write, but because there's so many other demands on my time. But it's when I sit down and actually get words out, I can actually get a lot done. It's the editing, the second guessing, the adding stuff. That's the hard part.
I know the feeling. Yeah. Well, someone just finished this for me, is what.
Yeah, exactly.
Get 90% of the way there, and that last little bit can be.
No, I'm not quite James Patterson yet, but I'll get there.
Yeah, or Steve Moore. with his 20-something books that he churns out. Yeah, impressive stuff. No, that's it. Do you? So have they followed a single character, or is it more different characters in the same sort of realm on the same sort of world?
No, I have two main characters. So I have Christopher, who's right now in the last book, he's 15 years old, and his uncle Tremaine they live on colony planet New Earth, and the reason I did that is so I can just make shit up as I go along, but it's just Tremaine's kind of a absent-minded, goofy kind of genius type of fellow, and he gets himself into some issues. And the last book, it's actually Christopher. It became more of a main character because I wanted to focus more on his him and his friends, and last couple books actually worked out pretty well that way. So
nice.
To appeal,
so much to talk about there. I'm really interested in setting something not on Earth, because most of the writers I talk with write relatively similar things to me, set in the modern world. You just tear a page out of a newspaper and somehow fluff it up into a story. Exactly.
That's which that works, obviously.
I mean, it sometimes does, and so
yeah.
But you've chosen to. I mean, for you say that makes it easier because you can make shit up. But that for me makes it seem really complicated because you've got so much to think about. You
got a blank slate. But think about it. You don't have to have it all figured out right away.
Right.
Unless that's the way you work. But for me, it's just, I just figure it out as I go along.
But all of the books are set in this new Earth, I suppose. So
yes.
And I know a lot of science fiction writers work to try and sort of work with some of the issues that we have as a society and sort of repackage them in a new... So they're sort of they're making a point, aren't they? A lot of science fiction books.
Yeah,
is that something you've tried to do, or do you?
I've not tried to do it. I've just tried to tell a story. But what I find out is that people read into it what they want.
Yeah.
So like one of the reviews I had, there's talking, the reviewer was talking about how deep the book was without meaning to be, and I'm just like, was this my book? Deep? No.
Yeah.
But it comes out whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And people will read into it what they want to.
This is it, isn't it? I think you're right. I think once you send that out, you can't control how it's consumed, can you? And the judgments that person will make about you and your thoughts and your opinions based on the fact that that's you've represented yourself in that way. Exactly. If I thought about it closely, it would be a little bit of a worry, but I choose not to.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's just like the review was talking about the deeper themes and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I did that intentionally. Sure, yeah.
Did you? Has this come from a background of reading those sorts of books or watching those sorts of films? And
Oh, totally. Lots of inspirations. So as a kid, I read everything I can get my hands on, mostly science fiction and fantasy because that was the easiest, the cheapest, and whatever. But of course, this was back in the 70s. So I was reading everything I could. Watched a lot of Star Trek and Lost in Space. I don't know if you guys got that over there, Lost in Space. But a lot of B movies, a lot of, I'd sit with my grandfather as a kid and watch TV. And then, as a teenager, I discovered Doctor Who. and that became a big influence. But gosh, yeah, just it's funny. Neil Gaiman put it best, where everything that you consume kind of becomes the fertilizer for your imagination, and that's exactly what happened with me. You know, all these influences, and they all come out somehow.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and you can't unpick it, can you? There's no way to say this is this or this is this. Like it's a complete mishmash of a mesh of different things that somehow create your stories. Yeah,
I'm sure you're the same way. I'm sure you didn't grow. You know, as a kid, you probably didn't read thrillers. I'll almost guarantee you didn't. But you know, that's what you start writing, and obviously you've done pretty well at it.
But I used to love the sort of thriller films. I think I always have. You know, the Bond style.
Oh God, yes.
Films. You know, I remember with my grandfather, in fact, watching. I think it was Octopussy or one of those. From the 70s. You know, and just thinking, this is amazing. What a great concept. This lair in the volcano. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that probably has permeated in some way, you know, through. And we also used to watch sort of westerns and other things like that. I mean, but then I often wonder that I think westerns and thrillers are quite close, and I think thriller writers don't like to admit actually that there's a similarity. You know, like a bad guy comes into town and the good guy chases him out again. Yeah,
exactly. Well, you know, it's funny. You can boil everything down to everything. I had a conversation with another author once, and she asked what makes science fiction or fantasy, and I said, well, if you think about it, every book is a fantasy because it's all comes from the mind of the author. True. So every book can be considered a fantasy, but every book can also be considered a mystery or a thriller because there's got to be something compelling the reader to read.
Yeah.
To keep them turning the pages. So there's got to be a sense of mystery and a sense of there's got to be a thrill in the story. So, you know, I think the genres that we talk about are really just constructs to get booksellers to group certain things together.
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah.
But you know, you can get really philosophical about it, but and let's keep romance out of this, but still.
But no, you're right. There are traits in all of those books, and I'm sure your books have a romantic element to it of this young man discovering himself and discovering the opposite sex or the sex he's interested in or whatever. And you know, that becomes there, doesn't it? And yeah, you're right. It's just those leading themes, those leading sort of things that categorize it.
Yeah.
Do you so is this set in a future time?
Yes.
And how far away are we talking with your?
I've never really defined it. It's just this nebulous future.
So it could almost be like a parallel same. You know what I mean? Some kind of parallel world. You know, as opposed to. But yeah.
It could be. But I have I've got a couple of more ideas to write in this series, and then I'm the very next thing I'm going to write is going to be different. It's going to be set, modern day, but still young adult, still kind of science fiction fantasy. But we'll see how it turns out.
So have you got sort of a definitive end point for this series that you're working towards?
No, it's just open ended.
Yeah, but you want to get to sort of book 8 or something before you move on to your next project.
Maybe. We'll see.
Well, you just said I've got a couple more things.
I've got a couple more ideas. Well, I want to stretch the muscles first a little bit with something else, and then I'll go back.
Yes, I see. How with sort of science fiction and science fiction or middle grade as I think you called it. How do you sort of keep each story different so as not to so as to not to recycle it? For me, it's quite easy because I send my characters to a different place. The person that goes missing is different. The antagonist is different. So the only similarity is those two characters. How do you?
I don't think I've ever. It's just each story is different.
Right.
Each story has each book is a complete story. So even though it's the same characters, the same series, each story is completely different. So like the first book is definitely more of a traditional science fiction premise. Second book is a little bit more of an adventure. Third book is more of a back to a little bit more sci-fi. Fourth book is kind of a whodunit, kind of a mystery. The fifth book is definitely has more of a thriller element to it.
Oh, interesting.
And the sixth book is a little bit more of a fantasy, if you want to put it that way, but all within the same envelope of science fiction. And there's always that sense of adventure.
Yeah.
So
that's really interesting. I like the way you sort of define that and thought, because I feel like some of my books are more mystery, some are a bit more crime, some are a bit more sort of gangster or assassin, others are more they serial killer or whatever. You know,
exactly.
The context sort of changes slightly. Yeah.
So it's and I don't and frankly I don't think that matters. You know, as long as you're telling a compelling story, then people are going to read it. And in fact, I was told by two separate people who don't even know each other that this last one was probably one of the better ones of the series, or the best one. This is their favorite. So we'll see how well it goes.
That's great to hear, isn't it? Because there is always a worry, and Steve and I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago that your last book will be the last one that'll be the best you could ever write, and then it's downhill from here. So
you really want to hear that your latest is always the best.
Yeah,
because that means you're getting better.
Yes, that's true. So talk me through your process then, from sitting at the keyboard and bleeding to
literally. You go through a lot of keyboards that way, bleeding. But,
a lot of transfusions as well.
Liters of beer. Well, it starts with just where the idea comes from. Usually, I imagine there's a scene or a conversation that I imagine, and it just works out from there. And it's all really up to that point. It's all in my head, and I'm just mulling it over and turning it around and figuring out where I can go with it. And then I start just kind of in a notebook. I write down some just ideas of where can I take this, and my biggest hurdle at that point is figuring out how many hurdles I'm going to throw at my characters. What's the stuff that's going to happen. And I'm sure everybody has the same issues, but for me, it seems to be at that point, that's my biggest problem. but once I get enough, I get things down, kind of what's going to happen in each chapter. And once I figure out I've got a beginning, a good middle, and a good end, then I can sit down and start writing it. And that I jump on the computer and I just start typing away.
So there's a fair amount of work that goes in prior to that first, to
not
a
as
word
much
being.
As it should be probably, but I'm definitely not a plotter. I'm kind of a in between plotter and a pantser for sure, because there's a lot of discovery writing that happens. A lot comes to me as I'm sitting there typing at the keyboard. Yeah,
I find the same actually, and I think that's a good thing. With Dawn Brooks, I was talking to on Wednesday. She said that she writes mysteries, like straight up cozy mysteries, and she said she doesn't know who the killer is until everyone else finds out at the end of the book.
I find that wild. I would imagine mystery writers especially. I think mystery writers especially have to have it all figured out.
Yeah, I thought she was like, she would figure it all out and know all the clues and know. Yeah. But she says no. She gets them all in the drawing room at the end in the final scene, and then she decides who the killer's going to be, and then goes back and laces in a few extra little hints and whatever. But yeah, I just thought that was such a great way to
but that definitely keeps the mystery fresh and organic, which probably entices the readers.
Yes, yeah, that's what I thought. And often I've planned things when I have planned well.
Yeah.
And then when I get to it, I'm like, nah, that's not right. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of and I've heard it from a lot of authors that the books will always go in a different direction. So so eventually you have to redo your outline, or you just keep writing. So I've heard that from a lot of some more successful authors than me. Let's just put it that way. So I know it happens to everybody.
Yeah. I think that's an important point. Is just to, you've got to sort of discover it. You got to sound it out and sort of see how you go with it.
Exactly.
as and when you sort of go with it.
Exactly.
So do you have your main character aging each time? Is he?
No, the first book he was 13, and then by about the third or fourth book he became 15, because I kind of like the age of that age a little bit better for him, and it's worked out a lot better.
And now he has been that.
He's gonna be 15 for a while.
Right. Yeah. Do you? So you say in the book he is 15, like
yes.
it's in dialogue or whatever. He enjoyed his 15th birthday 2 weeks ago or whatever it might be.
Like that. Yeah.
Okay.
He's grown up, and his relationship with his uncle has changed throughout the books too. Before it was at the first book, he's more of the sidekick, but by the fifth and sixth book, he's more of an active participant in what they're doing. So part of that is the way my writing has evolved. Part of that too is I wanted this to be more of a book that kids can pick up and identify with the character a little bit more. Maybe.
How do you believably get him away from the influence of adults? His uncle you mentioned, or parents, or guardians, or whoever might be looking after him.
I don't.
So,
I don't.
But I mean, so how does that? How is he in threat then? Is what I'm trying to ask. How do you get a point that he's in danger if he's, I mean, I know 15-year-olds are quite autonomous anyway, and go as they please often, but
it kind of happens with this last book, he kind of gets himself in a pickle, and he has to figure out a way to get himself out of it.
It sounds like there's some experience, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the best way to figure it out. He's got to figure out what's going on and what really is happening. And that's part of the whole mystery of the story, is what's really going on.
Yeah. Are the stories what sort of antagonists does he come up against? Are they, and what sort of scale are your stories? Are they sort of, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and each book is different. So, the first book, there really wasn't an antagonist. It was man against technology. And
oh, cool. Well, technology is the antagonist, then, isn't it?
Exactly. The second book was more on a small scale, one-on-one. You got the good guy, you got the bad guy.
Yeah.
And are you going to be able to stop what the bad guy wants before they make a mess of things? The third book was more about the same, one-on-one. Each book is just a little different. So the fourth book was widening the scope a little bit. It had more worldwide consequences. The fifth book was about the same, but it was more of I wanted to write more of a James Bond type thriller with that one. And that, so, you got the megalomaniac and wanting to take over the world for their own purposes. Then their reasoning is sound to them, but they have to break a few eggs, so to speak.
Yeah.
And how the heroes stop them. And then the sixth book is a little bit more man against nature, but not in a bad way. It's just a misunderstanding, shall we say?
No, I think that's a good sort of broad range there, and I'm enjoying how each of the scope of your books and sort of the context of it changes at each time.
Yeah.
It's not just enter another antagonist who is just the same with a different color jumper on,
right.
or whatever,
exactly.
from a different part of Russia,
Yeah. That just gets boring after a while,
it would do, wouldn't it?
But and it's funny because there was no rhyme or reason to it. It was just, that's the story I wanted to write for that book, How long does it take you from
that stage? I mean, when you're writing, right through, do you? I mean, I know you've got lots
In
of
my
other
fits
pressures
and
on your time
starts,
and whatever. Yeah.
With my fits and starts, it usually takes me about 6 to 9 months.
That's still really good going, though. I mean, I've
Yeah.
struggled to produce a book in under 6 months, and I've got much less, many more things to procrastinate about than you
really.
have.
And I think about it because there's so many other things seem to take precedence every day. Even if I had the time to sit and do it, I'd probably be more like Stephen Taylor. I'd be like, I just don't feel like it right now.
Yeah.
And I get where he comes from, because I feel it too.
Yeah.
I have an hour to sit down and write, but kitchen needs to be cleaned, or I got a yard that needs to be mowed, or something else needs to be done.
Yeah. It is one of those things, and I remember writing my first book when I was teaching full time, and I'd get up before the sun rose and write my 40 minutes, and then rush off to school, and in the car on the way there, I'd be imagining, what if I had the whole day to do this? I would write 10,000 words a day if I had the whole day. But that's not the way your brain works. I'm afraid. And now the idea of a forced hour would be like, I could do that. I could do with that. Not that I'd want to go back and work the whole day again. Absolutely
exactly.
not.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's amazing how much you can do if you focus for an hour. How many words you can push out. It's amazing. So I sat once and I wrote in a 2-hour stretch. I had like 8,000 words out, and I was just like, I was exhausted. I was exhausted by the end of that.
That's insane. 8,000 words in 2 hours. Wow.
I knew what I wanted to write. The other times I'll be sit there for an hour, and if I get 500 words, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So it just depends.
Yeah. There's different schools of thought, isn't there? And I think as a writer, you've got to be sort of independent enough to know how your brain works and how you want to spend your days, really. Because I think ultimately you can fight your way out of a job working for someone you don't really like, and fight your way into a job working for yourself who's even worse than the person you know.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah, you end up liking even less than the person.
Exactly.
For less money as well, often. Yeah. That's it. Steve Moore says, F it, cracked a beer.
There you go. Jeez, it's not even 12 over there.
I know. What a guy. And then he says, 8K in 2 hours is insane. I'm in fast, but that's incredible. I'm really impressed by that. Yeah.
To be fair, that's only happened once. So, and it may not happen again.
Yeah. Are you sure you didn't add a 0 accidentally? I mean, that's much more like what I would have done.
Yeah, no.
I'm sure that was 8,000. No, it was 80. Oh, okay.
No, that was a while ago. It was like 2 years ago, and I haven't done it since.
Yeah.
So it was probably a one-off. I'll tell you that.
Just a particular flush, like a flurry of inspiration.
Exactly.
I really like it. No, but that's it. I think you've got to be open to those times when the inspiration comes. I read
exactly
Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. She talks about this. She talks about the muse being separate to the writer, which I think is a great way to think about it. And all you've got to do is sit there and wait for the muse to decide that it's worth you visiting you on that particular day.
Exactly. Yeah. The hard part is getting the muse to come and have a 5-minute stop off.
This is it.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's because you're hogging it, aren't you? Between all the hours,
Exactly.
It can't make it over to me. But anyway, no, it's worth trying these things. So, what stage of your latest project are you at the moment?
I'm at the planning stage. So I've got an outline tentatively written, which needs a little more filler, and I've been kind of mulling it around. So I've got some more stuff to add to it, but I may not do that until I actually start writing. But this one, hopefully I can write make it longer than what I've been writing. So right now, for middle grade books, they're hovering around 30,000 words.
Right.
And so for, and it's funny because I had no idea, but like, are you familiar with the Goosebumps books?
Yes, R.L. Stein. They were great. I remember those. So
I read a few of those when my kids were little, and so those are great books, but they're 26,000 words. That's it. And he made a point. I actually listened to his masterclass, and it was just fascinating guy, just funnier than hell. But his books, 26,000 words. That's it. No more, no less. 26,000 words. And that's perfect for middle grade because their attention spans. So I figure my books are around 30,000 words, within that range, perfect for that. But I want to write something that's got a little more meat to it. So if I can get to 50, 60,000 words, that'd be awesome. But we'll see. I just have to come across the right idea.
That's it. And that's a good point, isn't it? I think what R.L. Stein has said there is the book is as long. What is a really important thing is the book is as long as it should be.
Right.
It shouldn't be packed out with unnecessary scenes or unnecessary dialogue or whatever. It's just as long as it needs to be.
Exactly.
And I think that does take confidence, doesn't it, as a writer, to know, no, actually that bit, I'm not going to start it there. I'm going to start it 2 scenes later and get rid of all of that.
Well, that comes with not just confidence, but with experience. As you write, you learn the tricks. You learn what captures your readers, what works, what doesn't work, because they tell you.
Yeah.
If you have a good relationship with your readers, they'll tell you what works, what doesn't work. So,
yes, no, you're absolutely. And you see it yourself when you revisit things, or even when you read within the genre, you see, oh, that's interesting that person has done what they've done here. Exactly. What I've done with my book Istanbul that I'm labouring my way through at the moment, it's a bit like pulling teeth in the last week. It's been really tough work, but I've done something that I really like, and I wasn't sure about it to start with, but now that I've settled with it, I think yes, I've taken a scene from the middle and put it at the start.
Okay,
and then it goes 2 weeks earlier. And then we learn how they got to that really action-packed scene in the middle.
I've seen that work really well in a couple of other books, and where it starts in the middle of this action, and then the first half of the book is basically the flashback to getting to that point.
Yeah,
and it works because it just sucks you right in.
Yeah, and I've seen it in books, I've seen it on films and TV programs, and I was just writing, I was like, this opening scene's not that exciting, and I was like, I think this could work really well, and I think, but yeah, it's about just trying things, I suppose, isn't it? And
right, and especially in a series like that, when you've had, when people are already familiar with your characters, you can do that.
Yeah.
How far along in that beer are you? You got about a pint?
I'm probably about halfway.
There you go.
Probably about there. Which works quite nicely because we're at 38 minutes.
There you go.
Look at the designs on this beer as well. Look at this. It's got like a wolf on and
holy cow.
And all sorts.
That's a work of art right there.
Yeah. Amazing. Oh, it's on the other side. Not so much. Oh, it's nice. I think I might keep the can for some purpose or another.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah. Let's have a
look. So that works. But if you're just, there's a series of books. There's a trilogy that I read. Can't remember the author's name, but it was Infinity, Lost, Infinity. Infinity was in the title of all 3 books. That was the name of the main character, was Infinity. And the first book was really just introduction. The second book started smack dab in the middle of the action, which I thought was brilliant because it made you realize what happens between the first book and the second book.
Yeah.
And then actually, forgive me, no, that was the third book that started that way. First book and second book were just kind of straight through, and then the third book started smack dab in the middle of the climactic action. And it was great. It was absolutely great. I love the way he did that.
Yeah.
You're right in.
That's it. You're straight into the action. There's lots going on. And you're ready. In my scene, the main protagonists are running away from some bad guys on the roof of the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul. So they're sort of rushing across amid these domes of mosques and
there you go.
Birds flying everywhere. It's only 500 words, but I thought it was just enough, you know.
Yeah, just drops you right in.
And I didn't want to give away too much because I didn't want to be I didn't want anyone to feel like they'd read it before, you know, like it's a copy and paste job.
Right.
And that wasn't, you know, it has to be different. What do you do in terms of violence and fighting and things? Because obviously your books are quite high conflict from the things that you've talked about.
Yeah, there's not a lot of fighting. There's not a lot of in this latest book. There's a little bit more of that type of action, but it's more conflicts are resolved without violence. Let's just put it that way. And I don't think I've done that intentionally. It's just the way I'm a non-violent person, so that I always find ways to avoid that. So that comes out in the writing, I guess. Yeah,
I think that's. It must be a difficult one with the age group that you write for as well, because even perceived violence could be negative, couldn't it? Even if you didn't show it, but it was perceived, like a parent would go, or a school librarian or whoever's buying your book might go, oh, well, that's not right for us, or whatever it might be.
Exactly. So you don't want to perpetuate a stereotype either. So I don't want every, you know, kids absorb so much of what they consume. So whether that's reading or watching TV, if you're seeing kids your age or a little bit older being violent, then you're going to naturally assume that's the way I'm supposed to be at that age. Yeah. So I show the kids being much more thoughtful and thinking through things and what do I do next? How do I solve this? So they problem solve rather than use their fists.
That's great, isn't it? That's really important. But the difficulty you've got there is that quite often reacting thoughtfully isn't dramatic, you know. And I think this is one of the problems with news media, actually, is doing the right thing. You know, it's very, very slow. You see someone face court trial and whatever. Mm-hmm. You don't get the verdict for a year. You know,
yeah.
You know, whereas if something more dramatic happens, it's like, boom, this has happened. You know, amazing. You know.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. The difference being is that you write it so that thought process leads to another problem. So for instance, they solve the issue, but that brings up another problem. So there's a little bit of a cliffhanger there. So what do we do next? And of course it's escalated. So you know, holy crap, now we know who did it. How do we go prove it?
Yes, of course. So the climax is that they prove that the person does it and hand them on to whatever relevant authorities are in the place
in a way, you know, not necessarily quite Scooby-Doo, but close.
I was literally thinking of Scooby-Doo at that point. Pesky kids, you know.
Yes.
It's interesting that you've that's a consideration with your, I suppose with your genre it has to be. And
I just don't want to perpetuate stereotypes of that sort of stuff, because that's not the type of books I write. Not the type of books I wanted to read. I wanted to read, and the books I did read were people solving their problems. Even the older books I read. There's a book I read, it was called Lord Johnny, and it was a swashbuckling adventure that my dad had when he was a kid. And it was so cool because the main character, there was some fighting involved with it, but the main character kind of became who he needed to be at the end of the book just by pushing through his problems.
Yeah.
Whatever they were. You know, I don't remember every detail of the book. I just remember it was just cool. But it was that was a fun book to read. But even the science fiction books I read that had kids in it, they were solving their problems without resorting to violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's a good attitude to have as a writer, I think, and it's something I think about. Something I try to think about is, you know, what representation is this perpetrating, or what
Right.
You know, what is this saying in a
But
wider sense?
but part of the convention of writing a thriller, there's inherent violence in that.
Yeah.
So, take for instance the most famous of them all, the James Bond movies and books. And obviously the movies and the books are so different, but there's still a point where there's violence. But that's the convention of that genre. So you have to take the consideration of your genre, but can you subvert that a little bit? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you do. And I think there are. But what I mean, I suppose, is in terms of the sort of character tropes as well.
Yeah.
You know, that no one is beyond. If I have a bad guy, and I know you mentioned this earlier, I try to make their plight understandable in some respect, and I try to give them a redeeming element. Whilst they're still bad,
they have to be sympathetic to a certain extent without being, wishy-washy. They still have to be a villain, but they still have to have their story needs to make sense from their point of view.
Yeah.
So,
I'm also, go on, sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was just going to say, I've struggled with that a little bit because you just want the big bad to be the big bad.
Yes.
You just want them to be this caricature of a bad person, but that's not very compelling, is it? That kind of make your readers stop reading potentially. But yeah, but you have to make them sympathetic and make them make sense within the story. And I bet you it's more difficult for writing a thriller than it would be for what I do.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. I don't know that every writer would put that much effort into it, but I try to. My books are a little more. They are thrillers, but they have a slightly more sort of soft edge to them, a slightly more sort of mystery edge to them. So I do feel that I put more thought into those things than others, than like a classic straight up James Patterson book might. Although maybe I'm doing that person a disjustice or whatever. You never know. Let's have a quick look. In fact, on these comments, I think Steve Moore's made a great one here actually about Dexter, the best example of what you're saying, a conscientious killer. Yeah. I would really like at some point to write a heist book. Because those heist stories where you want the robbers to get away with it. You want them so much to get away with it because you love them and their families and their plight and their up it to the man attitude.
That kind of turns that whodunit thing on its end, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because you become they become sympathetic characters. They become the heroes, even though they're the bad guys.
But in a way, I mean, could you as a writer let them get away with it? That might be a little bit of a, or you may be able to a little bit in some way, but they'd have to lose something as well.
Yes, exactly.
And Steve says, that's the beauty of telling stories. We insert our own moral codes on our characters and share our own messages with the world in subtle ways. Yes, he's absolutely right.
It works as long as you have morals, yeah.
Well, you can tell in Steve's books because all of his protagonists are vegans. They never have a bacon sandwich in one of Steve Moore's books.
Yeah, we won't get into that.
No, I'm not suggesting we should. What I'm saying is it's a pure example of what he's just said. Yes. He's sharing that in a,
Yes, no, and I agree with him. I'm just flipping him some grief, but
absolutely.
He asked for it, but no, he's right though. You do insert your views and your moral codes, whether you're aware of it or not, in your characters in the story somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an important point, whether you're aware of it or not. And I do sometimes wonder, is someone going to analyze these in too greater depth, and
they are
going to look like a bit of an unhinged madhead?
Yeah, they are. That's how they read into the stories what you may or may not have intended to put in there, and whether they're accurate or not, that remains to be seen. But just like with the stories, that the feedback I've gotten from some of the stories I've written, and that people are reading in the contexts, and that was not what I intended at all. But whether they're right or not, who knows? But it was I trying to make a larger point? Not consciously, but it just made its way in there.
Yes, I see what you mean. And is that a worry that someone might perceive it in a way that is counter to what you intended?
Well, there's always going to be those two sides. Someone's either going to agree with you or disagree with you.
Yeah.
And you have no control over that. So if you struggle with that, you're never going to get anything written.
No, that's true, isn't it? There's got to be a point where you go.
Yeah. You just got to say, screw it. And I'm going to write what I'm going to write. And people are either going to like it or they won't.
Do you find it difficult, or is it an added difficulty for you having readers of sort of children, basically older children, teenagers? Do you struggle to get honest or more detailed feedback from them? Something I wonder.
I get more feedback from the adults that have read the stories than anything else.
Yeah, because you can connect with them on a one-to-one basis. I imagine having a conversation with them.
I don't think too many teenagers think that deep about it.
Yeah,
they read it and they're done with it. I don't think they look for the deeper meanings. I think that's what we as adults do, because we're looking to connect with something somehow. There's always, I think we look more for the deeper meanings than the kids do. The kids will look for it. I don't remember thinking about that when I was a kid, when I was 15 or 16, reading and thinking of the deeper messages that were going on there. In fact, I guarantee you I didn't. It was more, I just wanted the compelling story. So the deeper messages that you read, you'll notice more as an adult.
Mm. Do you think they come to you after the time, though? Because I remember great stories that I read growing up, and now I think, oh, that's interesting. Either having reread them or just thought about them again and thought.
But you're thinking about it later on in life. You've got more experience. You've got more insight, shall we say? So you're looking at it with different eyes. You're analyzing it differently. So that will come to you later.
Have you read the Philip Pullman books? The Northern Lights.
I haven't. No.
They're quite well-known children. Probably slightly younger than the ones that you write, because the main character is, I think, maybe 12 or 13.
Okay.
And I read them exactly what you've said. I read them thinking, great story, girl with magic powers, takes over the world, amazing. But then when you reread them and think about them afterwards, it's got this real anti-establishment sort of vibe to it. It's really anti-religious, it's anti-government, it's anti,
Yeah. Well, I think the prime example of reading things differently as you get older is The Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
So you read it as a kid, and I read it numerous times as a kid, and it's really just the good guys trying to get rid of this ring to defeat the bad guys. But then as an adult, you start realizing how much of Tolkien's own experience went into those books. So his experience in World War I came out. His experience with death came out. His insight in the world as an older man writing these books came out in those books. So but as a kid, I didn't see any of that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. There are many layers in going on in any story that you read.
Yes.
You just may not be aware of it at the time.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you have connected those dots because you know Tolkien's background and he was in the various wars and whatever. I always wonder if you could do that without knowing the context, or what you would think without knowing the contextual things that bring that sort of highlight that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I wonder if you try to do it consciously, if it comes off as being a little contrived.
Yeah.
I think it works best when you're not thinking about it and it just happens naturally.
Exactly. Yes, it would. It would. I think, and I think you see this if you look at the books and films of the last 50 years, you see this naturally. And I think a conspiracy theorist would say there is some power
Agenda.
at play.
Yeah.
Because actually you could connect the two very clearly. You can say, during the Cold War, there were loads of books and films that villainize Russian people.
Oh, yeah.
And a conspiracy theorist could say, well,
Yeah, exactly.
That was the play. The CIA wanted this hate against communists, so they funded all these films. But actually, it's in the public psyche, and they're interested in it, so it becomes a thing. Perhaps, I don't know. Maybe they did. I'm not sure, but
I see where you're getting at, and that's another level above what we're talking about. I think too, is there an agenda that you're trying to get across? But I think in the terms of say let's go back to James Bond. So those books were written before the Cold War, but it was kind of beginning that the tension was there still.
Yeah.
And the movies, like especially you see in the Sean Connery movies, that was smack dab in the middle of the Cold War. So that was definitely an overarching theme, whether they intended it to be like that or not. That's the way it's perceived now. You can't make those movies now because the political climate is so much different. So that's why that franchise has changed so much over the years.
Yeah.
But I think if you are paying attention to stuff that's going on in the world around you, I think that naturally finds its way into the stories that you write, because it's what's going on. So everybody's familiar with it, and I think that just kind of makes its way unconsciously into what you write. So whether or sometimes consciously, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are going to have political figures show up in their books, whether they know it or not, because they hated this person, and that person's going to show up in their stories in some way, shape, or form.
I think you're right, and that whole subconscious, unconscious sort of agenda is a difficult one to sort of work at. And to sort of cycle back on what you said there about Sean Connery films in the 60s, I think you talk about how they were written pre.
Yeah.
And of course they were written in the 50s. That's when Fleming was writing. But what I think is very interesting here is that when you actually read a lot of those books, and I've not read them all, and you compare them scene for scene with the films, they're very different. Because Fleming, and he talked. This is interesting, actually. You talk about him as a man living through that period. In his books, Bond is a really damaged, aloof, vulnerable person who womanizes and drinks and does these things because he isn't in touch with his own self, because he can't get any, because he's escaping, because he can't get any closure on his own lack of emotion or whatever.
Right.
But in the films, he's seen as this really suave man who's got women sort of draping all over him, and that's it's a subtle twist, but it's an interesting twist to show that sort of difference between what we're talking about, a post-war period in the 1950s and the representation of men in post-war Britain, and the swinging 60s. There was no place for a weak, vulnerable man in the swinging 60s. No. That wouldn't have sold a film. So that is a.
You're right. You're perfectly. You captured it perfectly right there. So I think I think our biases are going to show up regardless, and the world around us is going to show up regardless. Just the whole. If you couch it in a compelling story, and that is very subjective. It's people are gonna pick out what they want to pick out of it.
Yeah, that's it. I think they do. I think you just sort of, you just got to try, haven't you? Sorry, we've got a bit. This is why I love these conversations, particularly after
a beer. Yes.
After 500 milliliters of flax. Jobs are good. And let's have a quick look at these comments. We are just about to pass the hour, which is amazing.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
so
that went by fast.
Yeah. So we will wrap up at some point shortly. What are your plans for the afternoon, for the day? In fact, you're still in the AM, aren't you?
Still in the morning, yeah. So we've got a couple of errands to run, and then we're going to a college football game this afternoon. So
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Yes.
That's something I have no context to understand what a college football game would be like.
Yeah.
So, we talked about.
Yeah, so it's American football, not football in the English sense, as Steve is always keen to remind me. But
I don't understand either, so yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. So it's the college my wife went to that I've become an adopted fan of, and they're a great team, and it's a great stadium, and they have they do what's called sailgating because it's right on Lake Washington. So a lot of people come in with their boats and they moor outside the stadium, and it's a tailgate party on the water.
Amazing.
It's absolutely amazing. So it's really cool.
I love it. That sounds great. What a nice afternoon. Yeah. That sounds fantastic.
And it's going to rain all afternoon. So.
Oh, well, that's not so good. But I'm sure you'll have a lovely time myself. Steve says Money Heist was phenomenal, which it was. We've been watching that, and as far as heist movies go. But I do think now, actually, we've got more empathy now for the villain, haven't we? I don't think so much 20 years ago. No, I suppose sort of Scarface was a villain film, wasn't it? And he was.
But he wasn't portrayed as the hero though either. He was the main character. And I go back to like The Sopranos. Have you seen that show?
I've seen a couple of them, but not the full.
So
whack.
Yeah, so they were all the quote unquote bad guys. But we as a society, I think we've kind of blurred the lines between. It's not as black and white as it used to be in say the 60s or the 70s. It's become much more of a gray area. We've embraced the anti-hero a lot more. Yeah. So that's how characters like James Bond or Tony Soprano or whoever the main character is in Money Heist. I've never seen it, so I can't speak to that. But they do illegal things. They do things that we would term as a society as bad, as wrong. But yet we're drawn to that because it goes back to the whole escapism idea and all that. So I think it's really unique, and it's really interesting to see how that has become more the standard. You don't have the goody two shoes. Superman is not goody two shoes anymore. He's definitely more of a gray area character in the comic books, because you can't have that. There's not anybody who can be that Boy Scout, that you picture as the good guy always being, go back to the old Westerns, the guy wearing the white hat was always the good guy, right? So you don't have anybody doing that anymore. Everybody's got shades of gray to them. And that's come out in the media that we see.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's to do with media is a big one. And I think sort of the reduction of gatekeepers as well in the modern world. Like if you back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s to make a film, that's the way you'd make a media, wasn't it? Or you'd write a book which would have to be published, and there weren't very many published. So if you were writing something about a drug dealer who trying to look after his family in downtown LA or wherever.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not going
that
to.
Wasn't
no one's going
to. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No one's going to support that.
Yeah, exactly.
They want a Christian father struggling against this, that, and the other.
Not to say there's still not a market for those books.
No, not at all. I'm not suggesting there isn't, but the market has become
much broader. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Right, Alison says, and we'll start to wrap up. I recently reread War of the Worlds, and it has so much of a hidden agenda that I didn't pick up on years ago. Yes, you're right. You're right. And that's the interesting thing about War of the Worlds, I read that, and I don't know if you've heard this as well, Terry, is that it was a radio play, and it was broadcast somewhere in America, and it was broadcast in such a way that the people who listened to it believed it was real.
There was a big hysteria. Yeah, Orson Welles was the man who did it. Yeah, so yeah, it was a that just goes to show how people
how people believed what they were read. There was so much trust in what was printed at that time.
Yeah, and it was on the radio. So the way they did it was so realistic. It just caused this mass hysteria, which to me, thinking about it now, that could never happen now.
No,
could never happen now. Well, because of the internet, but
that's true,
but still, but still, you think about it, it's like, wow, that was just so wild for that to have happened. But totally, there's so much going on that people, that was what people turned to, was their radio, the news programs. And if it sounded like a news program, God, it must be real.
It's a very interesting one. And I definitely think
I'll have to reread War of the Worlds now, because I want to pick up on some of those themes.
Yeah. There was a film adaptation, wasn't there, about a decade ago?
Yeah. Oh, there have been numerous.
Yeah. That it's a. I'm sure it's one of those things that you can keep applying. Like even all of those great sort of dystopian. Would War of the Worlds, you say? I suppose it's apocalyptic rather than dystopian. But
I would say, more apocalyptic.
Yeah. Terry, this has been fantastic. I'm glad we finally got to sit down and
This has been great.
Watch me drink beer. I hope next time we do this, it can be one of your home brews.
Find out.
Let's hope so. So. Where can people find you and your books and things that you do?
You can search my name on Amazon, because I'm on Amazon. And then I'm on Facebook, so you can find me at Terry Marchion Author on Facebook, and that's usually where you can find me. I'm mostly on Facebook. I tried to do Twitter, but it just moves too fast for the old guy. And so I stick with I'm on Instagram, but not quite as much as I am on Facebook. But so Facebook is the best place to find me. You can find my website, terrymarchion.com, and there you go.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It's been amazing. You're so welcome. I'm back on Wednesday, the normal time, with Mark David Abbott, who's a thriller writer, who traveller as well, currently living in India, which will be a really interesting conversation. Back to thrillers on Wednesday, there, Terry. Back on my home soil. Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you so much, and thank you guys and girls at home for tuning in. It's been absolutely fantastic. As ever, I'll see you on Wednesday.